Wake that up.
LA's #1 hip-hop morning show is Nick Cannon Mornings on Power 106.
Nick Cannon Radio here on Power 106. It is an honor and a pleasure to have a community conversation with one of our community leaders. Been this way for years. So much so that we know her as family now. And to many, she is one of the most powerful women in American politics, but I say definitely one of the most powerful women and matriarchs in our community, especially in the 43rd district here, representing all of us, Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Thank you so much, one, for all that you do, but for joining us today as well.
So delighted to be here with you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, man, we need your wisdom. We need your words, your leadership in these times as always being fearless, always speaking up for us, whether it's to the president, to his face, sticking it to him as it should be. But even in a time of, we spoken to you in the midst of the pandemic and when the quarantine began, you gave us such wonderful words of advice. But even now in the times of civil unrest that have now turned into peaceful protests and people asking for change, we've had conversations with Mayor Garcetti. We've had conversations with many other community leaders and activists. And right now we just need some guidance, some leadership. So I hand over the bullhorn to you just to speak to our people on the front lines.
Wow. Thank you so much for that introduction and the background that you just shared with everybody. We're at a critical time in the history of this country and the history of the Black community in particular. It is a very special time because I think what we are seeing is a real effort to make changes.
Yes.
What I'm seeing is young people in particular who are involved in these protests, who have decided that they have courage, that they don't have fear. And they're out there, and no matter what attempts are made to shut them down, they have showed that they're going to be persistent, and they have outlived the attempts to intimidate them. They've outlived the attempts to basically run them back into their homes or other communities, et cetera. So I'm just excited about what I see, because the targeting and the killing of Black people, young Black males in particular, and of course Black women too, has gone on historically. And as you say in your video, whether you're hanging or you got your knee on my neck or the chokehold or whatever it is.
You're still lynching me publicly.
Repeat that line. It's so creative.
Whether knees or trees, either way, you're still lynching me. And,
that's right. Absolutely.
And we say that because obviously you've been a freedom fighter for us for so long, and you do have a seat at the table. But it is that way where it feels like this infrastructure of racism is something that we can't get past. And the fact that now that before we were sweeping it under the rug and we're acting like it doesn't exist. Now the entire world has accepted the fact that it does exist. So what are some of the things that we can do to implement change? And a lot of it, like a lot of the protesters have been saying hashtag defund the police and get rid of the police in general. Being the fact that you have that seat, you're speaking to the people. What are we doing, or what should we be doing as a community to implement that change?
Well, I think first of all, as a legislator, we have to continue to try and put forth legislature that will discontinue some of the practices of the police in the way that they use force. Now, I tell you, I don't believe that we can really change the minds of racists. I believe that a racist is a racist is a racist, but we can force rules and regulations on them because they have certain jobs that they have to make a living with.
Right.
And so got to force them certain laws on them so that they have to comply with the laws, even if they are a racist. Now, the other thing that I think we need to do is we need to say to our friends in the white community, don't just come and protest with us around this particular case with George Floyd. We need you in this fight ongoing.
For Breonna Taylor, for all the many other ones that we constantly have to fight for.
That's right. And I think that if you follow what is happening with your children who have involved themselves in these protests, you have to know that something's happening in your own family. And many of these young people are saying, we're tired of it too. We don't like what's going on. And we join in with, our friends that we've gone to school with, some of our friends that we're trying to develop some entrepreneur relationship with. And what we didn't know until we saw what happened to George Floyd, that's really the way it was done when the police are stopping these Black men and these Black people.
Indeed.
And so taking the message home, the parents can't stop them. So the parents have got to know that unless they join in this struggle to demand changes in the system, their children are going to be in danger too. When this president talks about calling out the military, and that military turns on the people, they will shoot Blacks and whites and purple and green and anything that stands in the way if they are absolutely supported by the commander-in-chief, who happens to be the president of the United States, who is basically a Dodge drafter, who now is commanding the Army and all of our, armed services. Right. And so we've got to keep the relationships going with the whites and not let it, just go away after all of this protesting, et cetera. And we've got to show up at the police commissions. We've got to be involved in creating commissions where there are no commissions. And we've got to go every day. A lot of people, don't understand Black Lives Matter, but they go to the police commission and they raise hell. Yes. And some people get very disturbed because they really shake it up. They interrupt, they challenge, they dare. But unfortunately, and that's the only way we can get the establishment to listen. And once we get them listening, then we can get some change. And I want to tell you, the indictments, not the indictments, but the charges that you see that have been placed on George Floyd and the other police officers are only because the protest took place. Right. And the shakeup took place. Yes. The demands took place. Now, you've got to be willing to have courage to be confrontational.
And we are definitely proud of this generation, as you put it, because they are fearless. They are stepping forward. And from people are leading by example, you stepped out many a times and you said to the system of racism, this institutionalized racism that has designed our police departments and our law enforcement, which I said law shouldn't have to be enforced. They should be upheld and safety should be promoted. And it's these terms that have, since the slave patrols, that have been perpetuated on our community in order to fear us. So the fearless that are now stepping out. But like you made a great point when the commander-in-chief has no problem saying he will sick dogs on protesters, or speaking of putting the military and how big their guns are and things like that. It's just this idea of fear, which racism is rooted in. What do you say to that? What do you say to him? I mean, you've never held your tongue when it comes to speaking about our president, but what do you say when the person who's leading the country isn't acting as a leader?
Well, first of all, I had to say that I was not shocked because I've known him to be a deplorable human being. And I started on him when he was inaugurated. And I told this country that this, not only was he deplorable, but he certainly didn't deserve to be the president of the United States. So when he talked about sick and vicious dogs, I said, he's the most vicious dog we know, and we're not afraid of him. So, and that's how we have to, deal with it. And we have to take off the comfort of, being nice and, being controlled and not thinking people are not going to like us because we dare to challenge. We just have to let our hearts, our minds, and our experiences guide us to speak truth to power from wherever it comes. And so, yes, that business of sick and vicious dogs, what he was doing basically was
talking in code.
Talking code.
He was
going back to the days when they put the vicious dogs and the water hose on.
Right, and even the thing where he said he didn't see any white supremacists in any of the riots. Like he didn't make the call yet to for his people to show up. Like those type of things where he's speaking to his base and he knows how to cater to his base well. But in this election year, how important is it, especially when a certain generation like mine has given up on the idea of hoping government is going to fix things. Can you encourage how important? Yes.
No. You guys have not given up.
Right.
I know that you've been disgusted and you
And
don't
discouraged.
and discouraged
Yes.
that the so-called leadership in this country has fought hard enough, have given the protection that young people deserve to have, and are looking to, the older adults to provide for them, the leadership, all of that. I know that. I know it has been discouraging. However, I am so inspired by what I'm seeing now, what I'm seeing with you, what I'm seeing with the young people on the streets who are not afraid. I saw the brothers, standing in front of the police, right, looking dead in their eyes and not moving. I said, we've arrived. We've arrived.
We've arrived.
We've arrived. That's right. And so I'm encouraged, and I believe that we're going to have voter participation and involvement by these young people in ways that we've never had before, even beyond what we saw somewhat when Obama was elected.
Indeed.
I think we're going to have a great big turnout. It's going to be a more progressive turnout with these young people, and they're going to have already demonstrated that they have power. And whomever is elected, they're going to understand that they've got to deal with this young group of people who have arrived.
I love it. Exercising that right that our ancestors have fought for. And hopefully we can implement some real change. Now, people call me a radical and an abolitionist when I say I feel like we need to do away with police officers in general and replace them with peace officers. But in a real sense of someone who's in government and working with legislature, what can we do or what can we work towards to reform law enforcement altogether to where it's not an overseeing oppressive process?
Well, this is going to take legislation and a concentration on making change by all of us. When I talk about going to the police commission and showing up, I'm talking about not only showing up at a police commission, but understand who the mayor is, who makes up that commission, who appoints them, and number one, thinking about getting elected to run some of these cities. I want to tell you, young people, there are cities that are getting elected in our overall country, in small cities, starting with small cities, sometimes with 12 and 13,000 people, 7,000 people in some cities. What I'd like to see is, I'd like to see young people put together a slate. And I'd like to see them start to go in some of these cities and use their influence and their power to take everybody out and to re-elect a slate of young people. It's easy to be done. It doesn't take that much to do it. I know a lot of people think you've got to have a lot of money. And of course, the bigger the office, the more money you have to have. But let's start with some of our smaller cities and let's go in, run for office so that you can make the decisions. Now, here's what we saw what happened in Ferguson. A Black woman was just elected mayor.
Yes.
That's powerful. Very important. And we can do more of that. And I think getting into the system to be able to make the decisions and to provide the leadership is very good. It's going to take some work. And don't forget what I'm telling you. And that's this. If you think that somehow you're going to take a hardcore racist and whatever you're saying, they're going to understand and they're going to empathize and they're going to change, stop thinking that.
Right.
That racist is whomever that racist is.
You can't talk people out of their disillusions.
That's right. But you can create change because that racist won't be able to work, won't be able to exercise their racism if they know where the power lies. And the power lies in your ability to decide whether or not he can be a police officer.
Right.
And what do I mean by that? We have a law in the state of California that's a privacy law that does not allow you to get into the records of police officers to find out how many complaints have been filed against him. But that could be changed by elected officials. That could be changed by young people who demand that their elected officials take that law up and they change it so that whether that policeman is a racist or not, you get a chance to look, whether you know it or not.
The public can see it.
Look at that file, and then you need to say, no, this one has to get off the police force. Can't be here anymore. We demand that this one gets fired. And so it's all about understanding how these systems work changing the systems based on, what you have learned about how detrimental the systems are to the well-being of all people.
Indeed. Well, Maxine Waters has always been a leader in our community and a voice for our people. Congresswoman Waters, or as we call you, Auntie Maxine, what will be Auntie Maxine? What will be the last thing you want to say to all the people that are listening here?
Well, this is what I want to say. I want to say that, of course, this issue of being targeted and being killed by the police is not new to us. This graphic display of what happened in Minneapolis with George Floyd being seen on the sidewalk with this cop with this knee in his neck certainly has been unnerving and angering and all of those things. But don't forget, we get to a point where enough people have said enough is enough and they've hit the streets. I started on this kind of resistance with Daryl Gates long before some of the young people were born.
Indeed.
There was a killing of a woman named Eula Love who was shot down on her porch in front of her children. And then, it has continued. This police chief not only popularized the chokehold, but he had something called a battering ram.
Right.
And it was a long, steel arm.
That would break your door down.
That's right, break your doors down. So because we started that, we changed the laws on chokeholds and battering rams in Los Angeles. But this kind of thing needs to be done all over the country.
Indeed.
And if there's anything I can say, it is now is your time. You've got the attention of the world. They are absolutely out in the UK, in London, and they are protesting with us. Don't stop now. And don't just make it 9 days. As long as, we're in this pandemic, you're not working anyway, you're not going to school anyway, hit the streets. Hit the streets, stay out there. They've had these curfews, but they had to back off of the curfews because they know that they can't lock up everybody.
Right.
They can't lock up thousands of people. They're backing off. And all this business that they talked about with violence and with looting, et cetera. First of all, the FBI know who the traditional looters are.
They do.
They know those who come from other countries. And they got everybody under surveillance that they don't think is falling in line anyway. And so we expect them to take care of that. But we don't expect that to take over the whole conversation and divert us from what we've got to do to change the system, okay?
Indeed.
So I would just say, keep up what you're doing. Stay out there as long as you possibly can.
There you heard it, a word from Auntie Maxine, a.k.a. Congresswoman Maxine Waters. We appreciate your time, your effort, and your energy. Thank you so much.
And thank you for your creativity and your inspiration.
Thank you.